Hi Year 12, hopefully this is going to work. I'm going to do a talk through of War Correspondent by Ciaran Carson. The first thing is here, you don't get marks on context, but just so you know, Gallipoli was the name of a disastrous battle in World War One. It was in the Middle East and hundreds and hundreds of people were killed. For example, I know that the poet Ted Hughes, his dad, was in a regiment of men, and like there were 600 plus of them and only 14 survived Gallipoli. So you can imagine how devastating this battle was. It was one of those famous ones where like the trench warfare just wiped out a whole generation. So you've got to think, when you're reading that and the first word is Gallipoli, what are you meant to think? It's kind of links to gun in that there's that first word, that first phrase, and it's meant to set up an expectation which the poem doesn't necessarily follow through with, but it does that deliberately. Take sheds and stalls from Billingsgate, scattered with scaling knives and fish, the tumble-down outhouses of English farmers' yards that reek of dung and straw and horses cantering the musy lanes of Dublin. So you've got lots of places here. Billingsgate is a fish market. So you've got sheds and stalls, and they're glittering. So it's very, very visual. The language in the poem is extremely rich and visual. If you're contrasting it, for example, with gun, which is quite sensual, this is very visual. It's very opulent. Sheds and stalls from Billingsgate, so it's like kind of untidy fish market. You can imagine there the smells and the sounds of a fish market. The tumble-down outhouses of English farmers' yards. So this is in Gallipoli, but it is referring back to England. So because it's a war correspondent, it's someone writing for back in England, and they're trying to use imagery to help people picture Gallipoli. And this is obviously the town. The tumble-down outhouses of English farmers' yards. So you've got the idea of kind of sheds in a farm, like tumble down. That reek of dung and straw and horses. So you've got the fish smell, you've got the animal smell, like the horses and things, and then the musy lanes of Dublin. And mews, nowadays it's just like in London, a load of houses down an alley. But what a mews was before everyone had cars, loads of people would have horses, and you couldn't park your horse at the back of your house. So what you would do is there would be a mews, which would be like a little wide alley with houses for the horses, little stables down there, and you would have someone who lived down there and looked after the horses, and that would be his job. And nowadays mews are expensive because they're tucked off the main road. In those days they were kind of hectic and busy, and you probably didn't want to work and live there, unless you really liked horses, and they were probably smelly because the horses all lived in the sheds below. Take an Irish landlord's ruinous estate, okay? In Ireland, at the time, over hundreds of years, a lot of land had just been handed over because of the wars, because of the troubles, to rich people who were on the king's side, basically. And sometimes they couldn't look after them. They had too much land to look after. And so Ireland got this reputation of having manor houses, like Downton Abbey style manor houses, but with huge areas around them, and they'd all be really run down. They'd run out of money because of all the wars that were being fought there continuously, and because often it was corrupt, like the land had been just handed to someone who didn't really deserve it. So you've got this idea of kind of tumble down, something that's rich but tumble down. Elaborate pagodas from a Chinese Delftware dish. So that is actually, let me find, I'll show you an image of Delftware. This is Delftware, you've probably seen it before. It's like this blue and white china. It's made in Holland, but it looks like it's from China. Yeah, and that's the idea. So you've got elaborate pagodas from a Chinese Delftware dish. So now it's getting more imaginative and more fanciful, this town of Gallipoli. So it's got this very kind of smelly, earthy side, and then it's got this kind of always magical side, where fishes fly through shrouds and sails and yards. That word shrouds, remember we're talking about Gallipoli. And here we've got fishes, and they're not smelly fishes, they're magical fishes, of leaking ballast-laden junks bound for Benares in search of bucket loads of tea as black as tin. So here you've got this idea of trade as well. All of this is interesting because it's to do with trade, because the Delft tour was to do with trade as well, because originally I believe the plates were made in China and then taken to Holland to be painted. But yeah, it's all to do with kind of trade, which of course a lot of the First World War was to do with. It was to do with making money. It wasn't a just war, many people consider. So you've got this idea of this trade, but also something very exotic. Back down to earth, take a dirty gutter from a back street in Boulogne. So how many different places have you got? Chinese, Benares, Dublin, it's got London, it's got Boulogne, it's got all these places all around the world. So many different nationalities come to Gallipoli. The sad thing is, they've come and most of them are going to die. Take a dirty gutter from a back street in Boulogne, where shops and houses teeter, so their pitched roofs meet. So again, this visual image of a kind of house that is tumbled down. Yeah, thinking about the war, thinking about the situation, a structure that is about to collapse. It's like society, it's about war. There's a lot of symbolism perhaps in these strange buildings. Some chimney stacks as tall as those in Sheffield or Irish round towers, smoking like a fleet of British ironclad destroyers. And here is your first bit of like war, British ironclad destroyers, so warships. It's so exotic, so amazing, Gallipoli, the correspondent's writing. And suddenly we're reminded, British ironclad destroyers, they're there for a war. Take the garlic oregano tainted arcades of Bologna. So like Italy, and you've got food, garlic and oregano. You're saying tainted, which means that the smell is there, but that has a slight negative thing. Linguini, twists of soups and smells of rotten meat. So again, it's weird. It's like now the countries are mixing together, because you've got Italy, Italian food in Italy, Italian, then it twists into souk, which is a Middle Eastern type of market, and then it starts talking about the smells of rotten meat. Now, here's the thing. What meat are they talking about? At first we're thinking, oh yeah, it's like a big busy market, but there's a reason for this smell in Gallipoli, and it's gradually leading us, if you think about the narrative journey, towards working out what this meat is and what it smells like. And here's your first clue. As labyrinthine as the rifle factories of Springfield, or the tenements deployed by bad employers who sit in parlours doing business drinking powers. So you've got rifle factories in Springfield. Springfield rifle is a famous kind of rifle. You're reminded, yeah, it's a labyrinth. It's confusing, like these factories. But the reason he's chosen rifle factories is because there's a lot of rifles being sent to Gallipoli, and have already been sent, because actually we then find out that after all this amazing kind of slightly touristy description, the battle's already taken place, and you've got this background smell of rotten meat. Or so tenements, those are kind of unfit buildings deployed by bad employers who sit in parlours doing business drinking powers. So powers obviously is a pun on the fact they've got power. They're sitting in their parlour, they're sitting somewhere dainty, while in their slums, they say, and then populate this slum with Cypriot and Turk, Armenians and Arabs, British riflemen, French zouaves, camel drivers, officers and sailors, sappers, miners, Nubian slaves, Greek money changers, plus interpreters who do not know the lingo. So you've got, here are the exploiting people, and these exploiting people by structure are linked with this, and keep coming back to the fact First World War was a war that was pushed along by business. So this idea that these people are sitting unaffected in their rich parlour, drinking their powers, and they've put into this slum, into this busy town of Gallipoli, Cypriots, Turks, Armenians and Arabs, British riflemen, French Zouaves, that's another kind of soldier, camel drivers, they would have been involved in the war, officers and sailors, other soldiers, sappers, other soldiers, miners, they're working to help the war, Nubian slaves, so that would be, there wasn't official slavery, but there were slaves there, so again, this kind of corruption. Greek money changers, well, with all these different nationalities, they need people to change money. Interpreters who do not know the lingo, so the interpreters are out of their depth. Under this thing of war, the idea of language missing and interpretation missing, yeah? And the lingo, it's slang. It's like, but you've got this idea of kind of a busy melting pot. Even though there's a kind of criticism here and there's these hints of death and guns, it's still like a busy, crazy slum full of interesting people. And then you're led onto, it's getting further and further into this idea that these are going to die, that there's a massive issue going on here structurally. Oh, sorry. Oh. Dress them in turbans, shawls of fancy needlework, fedoras, fezzes, sashes, shirts of fine Valenciennes, boleros, pantaloons designed by jobbing tailors. Okay, you've got the rhyme of tailors and sailors, yeah? They're just jobs, but one's going to die and one's going to live. Now, all of these are, again, the clothes of the different nationalities. So you've got the needlework shawls, I think that's the Greek, the traditional clothing of Greece often has these kind of needleworks on there. Fedoras, that's kind of like an American hat, maybe a British hat. Fezzes, that's a hat worn in Egypt. Fine shirts, there's a French Valenciennes, so yeah, it's kind of like French. Boleros, pantaloons, yeah, so you've got little jackets and baggy trousers. I think, again, that's kind of the Greek and the Turkish. So you've got, and turbans, obviously, that would be Indian. So you've got so many different nationalities dress here. So it's very visual, it's very colourful, it's a slum, but it's fascinating, it's full of life. These lists speed up the pace, it's full of life. But remember, it's Gallipoli. We remember it for death. Knickerbocker of ostrich and the pink flamingo, sans-culotte, and outfits even stranger. Sans-culotte means without trousers. They used to use that in the French Revolution, but I think it means just regular trousers, as opposed to kind of special cropped trousers that they wore in the army of the French. Requisition of slaughterhouse for the troops. Here we go. Requisition slaughterhouses for the troops. They have captured themselves slaughterhouses to slaughter their meat, but it's still hinting this is Gallipoli. Sorry, I've just realised my time and I'm speeding up. And stalls with sherbet, lemonade and rancid lard for sale. So it's lovely, sherbet and lemonade, then rancid lard. Ugh, yeah, that's rotten fat. Temporary hospital or two, a jail, a stagnant harbour, redolent with cholera, and open sewers running down the streets. And now it's starting to go downhill. You've got sherbet and lemonade, then rotten fat. Hospital, that's good. Jail, oh, not so good. Harbour, but it's stagnant and it's rotten. Open sewers and there's cholera, disease. It's starting to sound less and less filled with life and more filled with death. Let the staple diet be green cantaloupes. Oh, sorry. So that's melons. Swarming with flies. Again, this juxtaposition. And washed down with sour wine, accompanied by Byzantine jangly music of the cithara and multilingual squawks of parakeets. So again, it's kind of exotic and yet disgusting. Yeah, that clash. I like the contrast of language here with gun. It's similar. Landscape riddled with diamond mines of Kimberley. Oh yeah, well that's what the rich men want, the diamond mines. And all the oubliettes of Trebizond, where the opium smokers doze among the Persian rugs, again something they wanted. And spies and whores in dim-lit snugs discuss the failing prowess of the Allied powers. So you've got the spies and the whores, the prostitutes, are dimly lit amongst their mysterious business. It's romantic again. And now, and I apologise if I run out of time, you get to the death part, yeah? Because in this part, the dogs are sniffing the offal beyond. That is the dead bodies. It is Gallipoli, yeah? And you've got the soldiers dead or drunk among the crushed flowers. The symbolism of the crushed flowers. They are the crushed flowers, the crushed life of the future. And he says, I have not even begun to describe Gallipoli. He's done this description, but it is too complex. He cannot correspond on this awful thing. That's the end.